Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. We got a lot of breaking news happening this Friday. An influential federal advisory panel has rejected a plan to offer Pfizer booster shots against COVID-19 to most Americans. Now, the 16-2 vote was a blow to the Biden administration's efforts on the vaccine mandate and inclusion of subsequent boosters. It's going to be a battle between the FDA and the Biden administration, so we'll continue to follow that. Additionally, General McKenzie of Central Command confirmed this afternoon that no ISIS-K fighters were killed in the August 29th drone strike in Kabul. 10 civilians were killed, including 7 children in a Toyota. CENTCOM added that there will be no disciplinary action taken, and they stand by the intel which led to the error. A whole other discussion. We'll talk more about that on Monday, actually probably later on in this hour as well. And lastly, France has recalled their ambassador to the United States in anger over the trilateral strategic defense initiative that was announced yesterday. AUKUS, Australia, the United Kingdom, and of course the United States. This is an alliance which focuses on sharing military capabilities. And you can read more about this on my Substack newsletter, but essentially France is angry that Australia canceled their $66 billion submarine contract because part of the reason, because France could not fulfill it on time and on budget. So now for the rest of our program today. One of the most ironic aspects of the Biden presidency is the idea he put forward that he would be a uniter. And this is how the president was sold to Americans. This is how the DNC marketed him. It was time to put the mean tweeting and the bitter divisions behind us. Remember, you had Biden from Scranton. That's what we heard all the time. Scranton, Ohio. He was going to bring us together and he was going to take down all the rancor just a notch or two. But the mean tweeting might be gone. But our divisions have never been deeper. Mean tweeting, that's been replaced by mean speeches. And our divisions also have never been more profound. And our uniter-in-chief, President McUnity, he's making them far worse. In fact, every single policy decision, from leaving the border wide open during a pandemic to killing oil production and jobs, to mandating vaccines, to blaming the pandemic on the unvaccinated when both unvaccinated and vaccinated can transmit it, every bit of it seems intentionally designed to divide the nation. Now, the latest divisive policy decision is a choice to quite literally, physically hurt the people that the Biden administration disagrees with. And I'm, of course, talking about the administration's sudden decision to limit access to monoclonal antibody treatments in GOP-led states. Now, first, understand that monoclonal antibody treatments have shown to reduce hospitalizations by at least 70%. I mean, Dr. Fauci's even talked about this stuff. They love Dr. Fauci. So why in the world would the Biden administration limit the availability of these monoclonal antibody treatments in places like Florida or Alabama or even Texas? It's simple. He wants to punish Republican governors whose states are using, according to the administration, an unfair share of these life-saving antibodies. Here's Florida Governor Ron DeSantis explaining the situation. Watch.
We're going to work like hell to make sure that we can overcome the obstacles that HHS and the Biden administration are putting in us. They say they're cutting it because of equity. Well, look, the South has had higher prevalence this summer. That will shift, and then as more states and other parts of regions need it, we understand that. But part of the reason we've used a lot is because I have made it a priority in the state of Florida. It had not been a priority at the federal government level for months and months and months. We saw the need. We saw patients that were coming in. We saw a gap in understanding amongst the population. 100% of our population knew that there were vaccines. I would be willing to bet probably less than 10% had a firm understanding of monoclonal antibodies. So we saw that deficiency. We saw a lot of physicians didn't even know that this was an option. And so we acted. We were able to raise awareness, and we were able to expand access for people, which is very important. That should be celebrated.
Interesting point really quickly, too, about that. The discussion that a lot of people are having online, including a lot of infectious disease experts, that as the temperatures drop in the north, more people will be spending time inside, and they're going to see those reports, those cases increase. And in the south, when people come out of doors more as the temperatures drop, you're going to see a decrease. I mean, it's simple things like that that actually can play into this. Now, but with all of this, the success, instead of using this, the success of monoclonal therapies in Florida, it's not being punished by the Department of Health and Human Services. Yet just a week ago, Joe Biden said that they intended to actually increase production of monoclonal antibody shipments. Take a look.
Tonight, I'm announcing we will increase the average pace of shipment across the country of free monoclonal antibody treatments by another 50%.
But now, just 1 week later, in a total reversal, they're cutting shipments to places like Florida. Wouldn't want to help those red state folks. This is what Health and Human Services says about the sudden policy decision to limit just how much monoclonal antibodies states like Florida and Texas actually can receive. Quote, HHS will determine the amount of product each state and territory receives on a weekly basis. State and territorial health departments will subsequently identify sites that will receive product and how much, end quote. So why is the Biden administration doing this? According to federal health officials, it's to more evenly distribute the 150,000 doses that the government makes available each week. It's hurt and rescue because, remember, the manufacturer says they have ample supply. It's for equity because they're not running low on supply. There's ample supply. And that's, according to the manufacturers of this product, Regeneron. So what actually is happening is you have an administration that's decided it's going to publish Republican governors like Ron DeSantis by holding back their monoclonal antibody treatments. They are embarrassed because they got spanked on this issue by these Republican governors. Now, Biden said this pretty much as a week ago. You get vaxxed, you force your people to do it, you force them to wear masks, or the president said he was going to go after Republican governors. And it was the part of the I'm running out of patience speech that he gave to America last week. Remember that? Watch.
They'll not help. These governors won't help us beat the pandemic. I will use my power as president to get them out of the way.
Yeah, see? He was threatening red state governors, and he's making good on that threat now. And remember when he said he was running out of patience? We stayed home for 1.5 years. Our kids fell behind academically. Suicides went up. Drug use increased. Alcoholism increased. Fatalities from every other health issue that wasn't coronavirus already increased. So why don't you come try to tell us again that you're out of patience? We've been out of it for a long time. No, with this action, Biden's not just hurting the Republican governors by limiting the distribution of monoclonal antibody treatments. He's hurting you. There are real people in desperate need of these therapies. And it's worth noting that over half of the people seeking this treatment in southern Florida have been vaccinated. So this isn't just a treatment for vaccine hesitant people. The fact is, right now, the need for these therapies, it's way more urgent. In red states, you have a lot of people staying inside with the air conditioning. It's been 11,000 degrees. It's been the armpit of hell in some of these states. By the way, that's the pattern that we saw last summer because all of this also plays into it. Red states during hot summers force folks inside where there's glorious air conditioning. Praise the heavens. And it causes this very extremely catchy respiratory virus to have high rates of transmission. Now, as fall comes and the cold returns, it's the cooler parts of the country that begin to see their case rates rise because people go inside to stay warm, all close together inside. Point is, right now, there's an urgent need to get these monoclonal antibodies to red states. They paid taxes for them. They work. There's ample supply. So why limit them? Because that's how you punish and coerce people and states that don't do the bidding of a tyrannical federal government. Now, remember, this is supposedly the uniter-in-chief. He just threatened to take your livelihood if you don't get vaxxed. Screw your natural immunity. And now he wants to take away therapies away from people who desperately need it. Now, I mean, I don't know how else you say this. Look, I'm just going to say it. Biden's all right with allowing people to suffer and even possibly die because of politics. If there's a better way, if you think you have a better explanation, by all means, share it. We are all ears here. But as right now, I'm going to go off what he says and what he does. And it seems like all he wants to do is punish Republican governors that have been embarrassing him. And now the Biden administration says they're doing it in the name of equity. But of course, there's no need to send monoclonal antibodies to places where they're not needed. These other states haven't ordered them. That's another big thing that nobody knows. The reason why some states are not receiving X amount is because they haven't ordered that amount. There are currently needs urgently in some of these southern states. Now, why cut distribution to those states? Got to pay back DeSantis. He didn't bend a knee to Joe Biden. Now, this is the kind of action that takes the country to the point of breaking apart. I mean, obviously, no shots are being fired, especially when you're taking away these treatments like this for an entire state for political retribution. I mean, you're basically declaring a war of sorts on those people. But this is the pattern that we've come to expect from President McUnity. It's just like his vaccine mandates, which means if people don't forfeit their bodily autonomy, their jobs are going to be taken from them. That's tyranny. It's coercion. It's intentional division, and it actually causes unnecessary harm and even kills people. Maybe not with a drone, but with denying life-saving treatments. Now, one mayor in Tennessee is pushing back on this kind of tyranny, specifically against the federal vaccine mandates via their employers. So I spoke earlier with Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs. He said his county is not going to comply with the lawless order, and he sent a letter this morning to President Biden. You can read it on my Substack, telling him just that. Earlier today on my radio program, he joined me to explain. Watch an excerpt.
To me, the worst part of everything that the president said last week was when he said this isn't about freedom or personal choice. Well, in America, it is always about freedom, and it is always about personal choice. You know, we have combined politics, science, public health, and all those things. You know, too often as a local official, we get wrapped up in ensuring that the trains run on time. Well, my primary responsibility is actually to uphold the documents that I said that I was going to uphold. In my case, the U.S. Constitution, Constitution of the State of Tennessee, and the Knox County Charter. Those are all about freedom. I mean, that's the basis of this country. We have to respect people's choices. If we don't do that, we're no longer Americans. We're no longer America. If the president does not follow the process that he's supposed to follow, and he usurps Congress's legislative authority, he's not the president anymore. He's a king.
Mayor Glenn Jacobs was right to body slam that federal vax mandate. It's an absolute violation of your personal freedom and bodily autonomy. And this was done with no legislative process or any authority. It doesn't take into consideration the very real fact that some people can't actually get the vaccination because of various health reasons, right? And the mandate, it violates the sovereignty of the states. And the federal government has no constitutional right to do that. But what does the Biden administration do when GOP governors rightfully push back? They withhold these life-saving treatments from states like Florida and Texas. And I talked with the mayor of Knox County about this for Tennessee, and he's focused right now on this vax mandate. But I mean, I would imagine that this is going to play with all of these states. So in other words, the Biden administration is saying, we're okay if you get sick and could even possibly die, bow to us or pay the price. Now, here's Biden just again yesterday, going after, again, Republican governors. Watch.
The governors of Florida and Texas are doing everything they can to undermine the life-saving requirements that I proposed. And some of the same governors attacking me are in states with the strictest vaccine mandates for children attending school in the entire country. For example, in Mississippi, children are required to be vaccinated against measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, hepatitis B, polio, tetanus, and more. These are state requirements. But in the midst of a pandemic that has already taken over 660,000 lives, I proposed a requirement for COVID vaccines, and the governor of that state calls it, quote, a tyrannical type move. A tyrannical type move? This is the worst kind of politics, because it's putting the lives of citizens of their states, especially children, at risk.
First off, he says that children are at risk. If Biden doesn't know that children are actually incredibly safe from this virus by now, I mean, honestly, this is disinformation. The president of the United States standing behind a podium and gaslighting you. If anyone else did what he did on social media, they would be suspended. Actually, like the former president when he was still in office. But second, Biden's essentially saying this to these red states. You resist my vax mandates and mask requirements, and you're putting lives at risk, so I'm going to purposely put more lives at risk to punish you. That's like screwing for chastity. By denying your states your monoclonal antibodies that could save lives. So much unity from President McUnity. And rather than respect our system of democracy, which limits, there's a Supreme Court case on this, federal authority, and it grants flexibility to our states to govern themselves. Jacobson v. Massachusetts was about a state statute, thank you very much, and it never actually ever took that power away from the states and gave it to the federal government. Even during a pandemic, President McUnity is out for revenge, but he's really taking revenge against you. Why can't he leave people alone? Leave red states alone. I thought they loved federalism, like at one point, even when it was only convenient for them to do so. Want to increase unity in America? You let the country operate as it was intended. You allow states to govern according to the wishes of the people who elect those officials. You send the medical treatments where they are needed because people's lives are at stake. When did America become a country that chooses not to help people because we dislike their politics or their lifestyle choices? But here's Jen Psaki telling you that the federal government will now decide who needs help and who doesn't, and how much of that help they can get. And as we saw in Afghanistan, that's usually doesn't really go over so well, does it? The Biden administration will just decide what they feel like doing with these therapies, regardless of the situation on the ground. You're playing politics with people's lives purposefully, and that's absolutely evil. This is what, here she is trying to explain why the administration is cutting shipments of antibody treatments to the state of Florida. Watch.
One thing that I think people need to understand for clarity, facts, I know you're like facts, is that monoclonal antibodies are life-saving therapies that are used after infection to prevent more severe outcomes. So clearly the way to protect people and save more lives is to get them vaccinated so that they don't get the COVID to begin with. But over the last month, given the rise in cases due to the Delta variant and the lower number of vaccination rates in some of these states, like Florida, like Texas, just 7 states are making up 70% of the orders. Our supply is not unlimited, and we believe it should be equitable across states across the country.
There's been no reports of a lack of supply, so why cut them to those states only if there's no reports?
I think our role as the government overseeing the entire country is to be equitable in how we distribute. We're not going to give a greater percentage to Florida over Oklahoma, nor do I think are you suggesting that.
So 2 things really quickly. First, you heard her say to get vaccinated so to avoid getting COVID in the first place. So the administration is still contradicting the CDC. The CDC, Rochelle Walensky, said 3 weeks ago that those who are vaccinated still actually transmit the virus. And in fact, there was a lot of discussion that, again, they love Dr. Fauci. He even addressed this. People that are vaccinated compared to people who are unvaccinated have the same level of viral loads. I mean, this was a study that was undertaken. You can do more to try to examine the severity or the virality of it, whatever, fine. But to deny that the vaccinated are also transmitting this, to deny that, that's disinformation. And last but not least, this equitable treatment. Again, I was talking to the county judge of Montgomery County, Texas here, and they were saying, because they've looked into it and they've talked to HHS, these other states are not ordering them. So the dodge of, well, we're going to do it equitably, that's a lie. They're purposefully doing this. You're talking about very sick people, many of whom are vaccinated, who are needing these treatments because the vaccines are far from perfect protection. So even vaccinated people need monoclonal therapies desperately. But Jen Psaki and the Biden administration, they're going to intentionally keep people from getting life-saving medicines to punish GOP governors that President McUnity says he promised he would get out of the way. So what did he mean when he said that he would unite the country? Did he mean he'll unify America by eliminating everyone with a dissenting opinion? It sure feels like it. I'm telling you what, folks, we're crossing Rubicons that we may not be able to come back from. People are losing their jobs unnecessarily. They're being coerced to inject medicines into their bodies. They still have questions about what they're being injected with. They're just now starting some of these studies that address some concerns that people have. People are also now being denied treatments that could save their lives. All by a federal government headed by a man who says he's compassionate and wants to unite the country. But where is that compassion? Where is the unity? Apparently, this is the America they want. You're pushing people to the edge. People are actually giving up friendships, and family members are not talking to each other anymore over this. People are being demonized. The ability to feed their families and take life-saving treatments is being taken away from them. That is how you break a republic apart. You disregard the Constitution and you put politics over lives. You make an enemy of your fellow countrymen while you show more decency towards the Taliban. You deny treatments to your own citizens as you allow 2 million unvaccinated illegal entrants to flood across the border. That's shameful. He's the president. I get that we're very divided, but the president is supposed to rise above the divisions, not fuel them. His obligation isn't to his party line, but to the American people, all of them, to show compassion to all of the states, not just the ones he likes, and vote for him majority. Has your hatred of the opposing party made you callous to the needs of Americans who vote and think differently? I seem to remember a Navy hospital ship being sent to New York by mean tweeter President Trump to help a mayor and governor that hated him. That's what rising above political division for the good of the people looks like. It's an act of unity. You're the divider in chief. He is. And it can't continue. And I hope for the sake of America that this administration starts somewhere to respect the Constitution, show some compassion and unity, and turn back before it's too late. And if they don't, you can't expect the average American to obey the laws and do their part, especially if the president himself won't. Coming up, attorney and retired Army Special Forces John Lucas joins me to discuss not just the ideological purge of U.S. military academies, but the news that came from CENTCOM today. No discipline action, no disciplinary action at all. This is insane. Keep it here. How much equity do you have in your home? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that they have more equity, that the more equity you have, the greater the chance criminals could target you. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes, and Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is warning homeowners that they could potentially be victims and not know it. So cyber thieves can search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. They can find your home's online title, forge your signature stating that you sold your home, and then take out loans with your equity. Insurance or common identity theft programs won't cover you, so protect your most valuable asset. Register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim and receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value for free. Visit HometitleLock.com. Biden's ideological purge of U.S. academies is proving to be a disaster and not in the best interest of this country or our military. The latest example, well, just hours ago, the Pentagon confirmed that it killed 10 civilians and 7 of them were kids when targeting the wrong vehicle in an airstrike that was meant for ISIS-K planners on August 29th in Kabul. Gosh, just a disaster all around. No disciplinary action either. Attorney John Lucas, he himself is a Vietnam veteran, West Point graduate, and retired Army Special Forces. And he says there is no greater danger to the country than this effort to politicize the military. John joins me now to break all of this down. John, thank you so much for your service. And I also appreciate your insight into all of this. And I can imagine that the news today from CENTCOM, incredibly disheartening, but I know for those who served, it's a little bit more personal than for civilians.
Well, it is, and thank you for having me, Dana. And I just heard the news just before we got on here, and it's just heartbreaking to read of it. And you know, being objective, things like this can happen in wartime. It's a terrible thing when it happens. It does happen. But the fact that a strike like this occurs shows the huge risk inherent in this so-called over-the-horizon strategy that the Biden administration has adopted and touted to everyone. And it's extremely risky when you don't have people on the ground to observe and control what's happening.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because August 29th, we still had some boots on the ground, but we didn't have a complete withdrawal yet. And you raise a good point. I mean, even then, how in the world is that over the horizon strategy going to be effective in that area when this happens, when you're still evacuating Americans and civs out of Kabul? I mean, I don't see how that's feasible. It seems just it's almost seemed like the over the horizon was a strategy that they offered because they had nothing else that they could substitute.
Well, and there was, whether they will admit it or not, there was tremendous political pressure to do something to show that the over-horizon strategy would work. And so we don't know the facts yet, but I don't have a high level of confidence that we'll ever fully know the facts. But there's certainly strong reason to suspect that the military felt under a great deal of pressure to produce something for the administration to show that its strategy would work. And it, of course, turned out to be a catastrophe and worse than that for one family.
Right, very much so. John, one of the things that I've heard from so many veterans like yourself is part of the announcement from General McKenzie with CENTCOM is that there's going to be no disciplinary action. And I totally agree with what you said as well. I mean, when you are in a fog of war and when you're in a military conflict, the horrible reality is that you have loss of life in this manner. If this was a lower level military member who had made this error, they absolutely would have been brought up in some sort of disciplinary procedure. But that obviously, they were given the order to carry this out, and they carried their orders out as they were told. To hear that, I don't know if disciplinary is the discipline, any kind of discipline is that, if that's what I'm looking for, or accountability. Because I hear from so many veterans that the higher you go, the less that people are held accountable. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's almost a truism. It falls in what I call the category of stating the obvious. That unfortunately, that the higher you go, the less accountability there is. Other people, this is not original to me, other people have commented that privates or sergeants or enlisted men are disciplined for losing a rifle. But we, through this strategy, have lost billions of dollars worth of equipment and tens of thousands of rifles, but with no accountability. So some general, sometime, someplace, has to lay his or her stars on the line and say, I can't do this in good conscience, faithful to my oath of office and my duty, and I'm putting my stars on the line, and if you insist that I do it, I will resign. That has yet to happen, but it needs to happen.
And that'd be a powerful thing to happen too, putting the stars on the line. John, one of the things that you've been discussing is this ideological purge that's been taking place in the military. And I don't know if I've ever seen anything that makes me as nervous as this, especially, we're having this bust up with France right now because of that trilateral agreement that we've entered into with Australia and the UK. And of course, China has been saber rattling. I think it's becoming a question of when, not so much if, they attempt to try anything with Taiwan at this point. We've been focused on the Middle East for a very long time, understandably so, but I think some politicians have allowed our attention to slip in the Pacific. And so now, instead of, it seems like we've done more to get rid of anyone who would disagree with the administration, instead of actually deal with military preparedness as it relates to China. And with these military academies, what gets me is that the people who are being asked to step down have actual military service, more so than anyone in the administration calling for these people to leave. Tell us about this.
Well, in a nutshell, this is really the implementation at the level of the military academies, the Air Force Academy, Annapolis, and West Point, of what I call, or I think what's fairly called, the leftist strategy of politicizing education. And we've seen it going on, unfortunately, every week, if not every day, in the colleges for years, now at the high school, even at the grade school levels. Everybody's read about that. Many people have personally experienced it. We're now seeing the beginnings of it at the military academies. And you're referring, of course, to the Biden's termination of the presidential appointees of the Board of Visitors, which is the civilian board that oversees the military academies. And they were all summarily terminated. Jen Psaki, when questioned about it, said, well, and by the way, this was completely unprecedented. There are presidential appointees, there are people who are appointed by statute, such as chairman of the House Armed Services Committee and the senatorial counterpart and the like. But the presidential appointees were all summarily terminated. And Jen Psaki said, well, the reason was that their qualifications, the qualifications that the Biden administration was looking at, was they must align with the administration, with President Biden's values. So that's now the test for people overseeing the education of our cadets and midshipmen. Do they align with Joe Biden's values? That is the beginning of a very slippery, very dangerous slope to politicization of the military. And as you said, I believe that's one of the most dangerous things this country faces.
And it's very different from, do you support the foreign policy decisions, which you just, it's the commander-in-chief, you carry those policy decisions out. This is personal. This is not about whether or not people are not carrying out the orders of the commander-in-chief. This is what you think privately. This is wrong think. This is very Orwellian.
Well, it was both Orwellian and personal, because, as you say, these included people of the order of Lieutenant General, 3-star General McMaster, 4-star General Jack Keane, and they were terminated and basically said, we want your resignation by 6 p.m. and if you don't resign voluntarily by 6 p.m., you were fired. I'm sorry, but that's not the way. I don't care what their political views are privately or what yours are. You don't treat people of the order of General McMaster and General Keane in that matter. It's not only an insult, it's a calculated insult. They knew what they were doing. They were sending a message, and it was a political message.
We thank John for joining us this afternoon. Coming up, the fight for those still left behind in Afghanistan is far from over. Faith McDonnell joins me to discuss the latest efforts in getting Americans and our allies out of Afghanistan. And what's the truth to those rumors and those reports that the Taliban are actually hunting down Christians and any kind of ally in Afghanistan? We'll discuss. So despite the media and the administration trying to shift the news cycle away from what happened in Afghanistan, many are still working so hard to save our American citizens and our Afghan allies who are still stuck there, believe it or not. Faith McDonnell is the Director of Advocacy for KGI Global, and she has been working tirelessly with underground churches in Afghanistan to get more American Christians, interpreters, and informants out of the country. Faith connects people to each other with the mission on the ground, and she joins me now to give an update on how things are going. Faith, God love you for what you're doing to help so many people. I mean, I really feel like your efforts are, it's the last chance that so many people have, and they kind of look at you as a saving grace. So thank you so much for doing what many cannot and will not do.
Well, thank you so much, Dana. Thank you for talking about this. And I have to say to you right away that I am just a tiny cog in this giant wheel, and that there are amazing people who are doing this work. And God just used me to connect them with each other.
What is the state of things over there? Because I know we still have folks over there. Some friends of ours, one of my friends is Tim Kennedy. I know that he's been over there helping with people. I know the folks with the Operation Pineapple Express, where people were showing pictures of pineapples to try to get through and get evacuated. But we still have people left. There was a piece that I read this morning from the Washington Free Beacon, or this afternoon, that said it kind of seems like the numbers sort of lowballed, the number of Americans still left over there. And of course, we're hearing about Christians who are being persecuted, and even the phrase used is hunted down. What can you tell us about that?
It's horrific. It really is. There are people who are working, different organizations and Christian ministries, who will not give up. They just will not give up. The Christians from Afghanistan, who are really the underground church, are definitely being hunted by the Taliban. Many of them, there are organizations who are trying to get them out and are getting some of them out, thanks be to God. There are others who have said, we are going to stay. We want to share Christ with our neighbors. We want to even tell the Taliban about Jesus. I mean, it's like they are sacrificing their lives, but they really feel that that's what God wants them to do. And I've heard about miracles as well. People who have, they thought they were going to be killed and they weren't killed, or people who have been trying to get out on ground, and God will reveal to them in some way, don't go this way, go this way, and they'll have made a way out. But yes, there are heroes. There are true heroes, former special forces guys, veterans who are trying desperately to get both the underground church people as well as their former interpreters and people like that. That's how I first got into this. I was asked by an Anglican chaplain who works with the military, who is military himself, to be part of a Facebook group of military people, veterans, who wanted to try to help their interpreters and things like that. And I started filling out Excel sheets, which is not my gift, believe me. I would have panic attacks trying to fill in all those little squares. But those
God equips the called, Faith. He equips the called.
That's right. That's right. He did. He did. And what I didn't even know was those were the things that would be turned into flight manifests for the different flights. And when the U.S. government stopped sending people out, there were these wonderful groups like the Nazarene Fund and the Vulnerable People's Project, the Shy Fund, all these groups that are using planes, and wonderful, generous Americans who have given so much money for this. It just blows me away. And, you know, you watch Glenn Beck talk about it, and he's in tears. And you see people like Pastor Robbie Dawkins, who helped start the underground church in Afghanistan, and he's in tears because people have been so generous. And you know, I have dealt with evil for 27 years. I do advocacy for persecuted Christians around the world, but I've never been as angry in my life as I've been about this Afghanistan thing and about our government, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you speak a lot of truth to that. And Faith, also from people who are hearing you speak on this, I have always said I really do believe that after policy from politicians fail and after militaries are called in, really the first line are missionaries. It's all missionaries. And Christianity has freed so many who have been oppressed and has opened up countries through the millennia around the world. And you know, in our church, we have a number of missionaries that are in parts of the world where we can't even really discuss it. But really, ultimately, for those who might question why some people of faith might actually risk their lives and stay behind, I mean, that's ultimately why. And I think that's one of the biggest things from this. Tell me how people can help, Faith. How can people help this effort? How can they help you? What can people do?
Well, first and foremost, pray. And then give. Glenn Beck was saying the other day that the Nazarene Fund needs more funds. I mean, it's amazing. They got like $35 million from people in about 2 weeks' time, and they're using it. But they need more because there were some flights that were unfortunately stopped, and we won't mention who stopped them, wouldn't allow them to fly, wouldn't let them go to other countries. But groups like the Nazarene Fund and Mercury One, Save Our Allies, which is Chad Robichaux, and the Mighty Oaks Foundation, who is an incredible group as well. You know, the other thing is this is something that our veterans who needed healing from trauma and who have suffered PTSD, and then see this happening again. But the ones who are going over there and fighting for their friends, this could, you know, be something that God can use as a healing experience for them as well. And we're even seeing a little bit of loosening on the part of the U.S. government. You know, in my advocacy for persecuted Christians, I use the example from the Bible of the widow who pled for justice from an unjust judge. And the thing is, you know, she wanted justice and he was unjust. But you keep pushing long enough, and even an unjust judge or government will have to do the right thing because they get pressured. So I would say that that's what's happening right now, and pray to God that it keeps happening and that all these people get out.
Amen to that. Faith McDonnell, God bless you for what you're doing. Appreciate your advocacy. We're going to continue to watch, but people absolutely can donate funds and do that. And we'll have information up for how they can do that as well. Faith, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Dana. God bless you.
Thank you. All right, folks, coming up, huge news as AUKUS, Australia, UK, United States signal a long-awaited pivot from the Middle East to China. And France and New Zealand are mad about it. France pulled their ambassador to the United States today. I'm going to explain all of that next. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company serving premium coffee to people who love America. And they develop their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they learned while serving our nation. Here's the cool thing. Every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. So in 2020 alone, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. These guys are nerds. They're high-quality coffee beans. They only pick the best, and they get them from Colombia and Brazil. They carefully roast them. They probably even sing to the beans. I don't even know. In Tennessee and Utah, they have a signature roast that they call Lava Panther, and it's made from real panthers. It's not, but it could be. This comes from a small farm in Guatemala. So although temperatures are not at all cooling off, I'm not even gonna lie, don't forget to keep enjoying the great outdoors, fueled by Black Rifle Coffee. Best way to do it is to join that Black Rifle Coffee Club, and you can have your brew roasted, packaged, and shipped right to your door. You'll get discounts on all kinds of stuff, including exclusive products and merch. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/Dana. Use code Dana at checkout for 20% off your first purchase and your first coffee club order. You may have not heard a lot about this next story, but it is ridiculously important, and it's going to be playing in the news a lot within the next year. This whole story begins to shift the focus of America's foreign policy from the Middle East to the Pacific and the South China Sea specifically. Increasingly, this is where the biggest threat to America and the West is coming from. It's the Communist Party of China. And to counter this growing threat, this week, the Biden administration, together with leaders from the UK and Australia, they announced the creation of a new trilateral strategic deterrence partnership called AUKUS, actually, Australia, UK, United States, to offset the increased aggression coming from Communist China in the Indo-Pacific. And I've written a lot about this up at Substack, but the deal includes, and this is one of the big features of it, the U.S. sharing nuclear propulsion technology with Australia, something we have only ever previously shared with the United Kingdom. Now, relations between Australia and China, I mean, just today, Australia was saying, yeah, we could see ourselves getting into war with China. China's declared an economic war on Australia. They have devolved to a super low point. The Communist Party's state media referred to Australia as, quote, chewing gum on the sole of China's shoe. Always theatrical, aren't they? China wants to lead the world, but the dirty secret is that they can't even force smaller Australia to bend the knee. And as soon as the two countries signed this free trade agreement back in 2015, and you had the Prime Minister of Australia at the time, Malcolm Turnbull, Australia was already having regrets. Leaders were incredibly unnerved by China's attempts to buy favor, first off, for its policies in Australian elections. Now, several Australian leaders criticized China's aggression in the South China Sea, right? And China, they had constructed military bases on man-made islands and then tried to lay claim to the entirety of the waterway. And it posed a threat to Australia's shipping industry and trade, as it did to other nations as well. So when former PM, he was PM at the time, Malcolm Turnbull, he aligned with the Trump administration. Remember when Trump was lobbying all these companies to get Huawei out of 5G networks? Well, this is why. They didn't want a spy network in their country. And they banned, in Australia, they banned China's telecom giant and later raised questions about Beijing's involvement with the development and release of the Wuhan coronavirus. So the CCP responded with absolute fury. They declared an economic attack on Australia. They implemented tariffs and export restrictions. So, you know, they still haven't been able to bend Australia. China's economy is in shambles. And Australia, they're one of the rare countries in the world that export more to China than they actually import from China. In fact, China's very dependent on what Australia exports to them. In fact, over half of it's iron ore, and China needs that for construction and all their green energy garbage. So point is, Australia's relationship with China is pretty frayed at best. So hence the new formation of this strategic alliance known as AUKUS between the US, UK, and Australia. Not everybody's happy about it though. So New Zealand and France specifically are having tantrums about it. New Zealand of late has weakened its resolve against communist Chinese aggression. Their Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, she was blasted in the press and accused of prioritizing cheap products from China over her commitment to the Five Eyes intelligence network that was created between all these big English-speaking companies as an alliance and information sharing against the ever-bellicose CCP. So she and New Zealand's parliament, they refused to condemn as genocide China's continued extermination of the Uyghurs. But that's another reason why, not just that, but the increased aggression in South China Sea. And they also would not join other nations in condemning China's actions and Beijing's involvement and the distribution after they wouldn't close down Wuhan of the coronavirus. So all of this is why New Zealand was not approached for membership in AUKUS, right? So they're mad about that. Now, France is angry because the AUKUS pact cost them a $66 billion contract to build 12 submarines for Australia. And the other day, France's Foreign Minister, Jean-Yves Le Drian, told the French press that it was a, quote, stab in the back. And they pulled their ambassador today from the United States. Now, we got to point out, this whole agreement that Australia had with France was in trouble for a long time ago. They were having trouble, France was, delivering and fulfilling this whole contract to begin with. Nuclear-powered subs, they were pitching diesel originally to Australia. The delivery date kept getting pushed back by years and years and years. The price tag kept going up by billions. So Australia probably figured that 20 years, later on that contract, they might be a territory of China. So in any case, they decided to cancel the contract because China has increased aggression and they cannot hedge their security as a country on France's feelings, right? And so now France feels betrayed by Australia. So betrayed, as I said, they canceled a cocktail event tonight. They were supposed to have like some little French ambassador cocktail event in DC. I don't go to these things, I'm just telling you. But they actually recalled their ambassador to the United States and Australia. So now, as I said, of course, Australia can't risk its own national security against increased threats and aggression from the commies of China. And just because France can't deliver on time and on budget. Now, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, ever jolly, was trying to downplay any erosion of relations between the countries. It's not going so well. So that's kind of a quick explainer on AUKUS. And this is a kind of a long-awaited pivot away from the Middle East. Now, I understand there's a lot of questions that have been brought up, specifically as it relates to Australia's current state of tyranny. Now, we are in the very beginning stages of this. Time is going to tell whether or not this is going to be a successful relationship, whether it's too little or it's too late. So I can say I understand the concerns also about the tyranny of Australia, but I think at this point in the game, we can keep that separate from this geopolitical issue as it relates to China. But as I said, time will tell as to whether or not their tyranny affects their foreign policy in the same manner that Parliament New Zealand is affecting theirs. It's worth keeping an eye on. Now, China's imperialist goals and anticipated move on Taiwan, remember, this is viewed not as an if, but a when. And you already had China that sent 2 spy ships to Australia in Australian waters. So in order to avoid another war that none of us want, projecting peace through strength and an alliance like AUKUS, that could be a key role. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.